A Quora questioner asked me about anxiety. They really want to know, is anxiety programmed? Well, yes, sort of. It's not that anxiety is programmed, it's that our body is designed to deal with threats, right? So when we were cavemen and worried about a saber-toothed tiger or some impending threat, we wouldn't have survived unless our body prepared us to fight the saber-toothed tiger or try to run from the saber-toothed tiger. And that's how anxiety, anger, and stress at an evolutionary, physiological level basically works and what it's there for. Anxiety is there for a good purpose. It's there to help us survive. So in that way, yes, anxiety is programmed. It doesn't mean that we're programmed to be anxious people. That's created in a number of other ways. Now, well, some people might be. Now, some people are born, they get the gift from their parents of genetics, and they just maybe are more likely to be prone to be anxious. Now, that could be from a number of factors. One thing we know for sure is that could be related to neurotransmitters. A neurotransmitter is simply, it's a messenger that sends messages electronically or chemically from neuron to neuron. That helps messages get from your brain to your muscles to brain to help you move and emote. But the thing is, now sometimes we have problems with the neurotransmitters and that causes us to have different problems with our mood, and anxiety is one of those. So there's a inhibitory neurotransmitter, which means it's a neurotransmitter that brings things down. In this case, it's the neurotransmitter that causes you and I to relax when we get a little amped up. It brings us down. That's GABA. Now, if we don't have enough GABA and we get anxious, then we'll have a difficult time winding down. And we'll kind of always be like, worried, concerned, or more likely to be should we not have enough GABA. And that's why you find physicians or psychiatrists prescribing anxiolytics. Now, anxiolytics can be addictive, so sometimes it's not anxiolytics, sometimes it's antidepressants. Anyways, if you're ever wondering why people get prescribed those, that's what it has to do with. The other thing that could happen, it might be genetics, but then it could be environmental, or it could be, that your genetics got a boost, like an epigenetic kind of effect from your environment. So what might happen is that you experience something that is kind of threatening or causes you to be more stressed than usual. Anxiety, very anxiety producing situation. Let's just say that you're 4 years old and your dog Chuckles. Well, maybe it's not your dog Chuckles. Chuckles is probably a good dog if she's your dog, but somebody else's dog Chuckles bites you. And it's one of those good bites. They got their teeth in, it's bleeding, you're freaking out because this dog is about to take off your arm and then, you're gonna die. So since you have this fear of dying, your fight or flight system is activated. When your fight or flight system gets activated as a 4-year-old or even as an adult, you start to make, your mind starts to unconsciously remember all the triggers that are going on. So as Chuckles bites you, grandma comes in, she's wearing a certain perfume, you remember that. It happens to be winter, so you feel the brisk air and the scent in the air and everything that's going on with the weather. There's wind that's blowing, that wind you're remembering. And what happens is your body is trying to prepare you next time that happens so you can run or you can fight before that threat gets to the point where you might die because it thinks at this moment you're going to die. So what happens is as you get older, you may unconsciously have these triggers. Somebody who's wearing that perfume that smells like grandma. It's winter, there's brisk air. All of these things have unconsciously been associated with Chuckles, and now you experience anxiety and you don't even know why. This tension, this uneasiness in general when those triggers are around. So that's one reason. You can have the genetics we talked about, or you could have environmental situations. And depending on your genetics will determine how severe those environmental situations have to be for anxiety to permeate over a period of time. But regardless, if you have anxiety that you think is out of control for whatever reason, or if you have normal anxiety and you want to do something about it, there are things that you can do about it. We've mentioned, medication. If you should go see your doctor or a mental health professional, and that's something that works for you and your team, then that's good. But you can also just go see a mental health professional for different treatments. That might be some form of talk therapy. It might be what's known as cognitive behavioral therapy. The other thing you can do, though, is if you're into looking into these things on your own, I do suggest that you go see a mental health professional as a psychologist. Of course, I would say that. But there are plenty of books out there that have different resources that you can use. One that I would recommend is by Matthew McKay, and he's a professor. I think he's like in his 70s. I can't remember exactly what school he goes to, but I really like a number of his books. He has lots of books on different things, self-esteem, anxiety, and he seems to be like a CBT kind of guy, cognitive behavioral kind of guy. But one book he has out, it's called the 30 Minutes Therapy, Anxiety Therapy, something along those. That's not exactly the title, but 30-minute therapy for anxiety. Check that book out. It's a real short book. It has lots of valid, tried and true resources for somebody who's curious about how to reduce their anxiety or anxiety for someone in their life. I think that would be a good resource. So back to the original question. Anxiety, is it programmed? Yes, but the level of anxiety we experience may not just totally be from whatever programming we have. It might be from the environment, what we experience. But regardless of that, there are always things we can do to shorten the gap between how much anxiety we feel and other things that we're experiencing.